Recently, I covered the worst Calgary CTrain stations for stuff such as crime and disorder. During the worst station, I alluded to the fact that the bad stations in Edmonton get a lot worse than the stations in Calgary. Whilst this is true, there's less to do with the transit being dangerous, more with the fact that Edmonton is a pretty troubled city. When looking at major cities between Canada and the US, Edmonton ranks as the 4th worst for crime, worse than cities may expect to be worse, such as Detroit, Chicago, or Cleveland. The only major cities worse than Edmonton are Memphis, Winnipeg, and St. Louis. You also have to remember with this, the Edmonton city limits include a lot of the suburban areas too, which at times are very affluent and well off, meaning cities like St. Louis or Detroit really only include the inner city as the city proper, with the suburbs being their own separate cities. This means crime in Edmonton tends to be very heavily concentrated in just a few communities. In general, the north side of Edmonton tends to be a lot more troubled than the south side. However, even then, there's only a few or so communities which get as bad in a way you might think of St. Louis or Oakland, but they get very bad. In communities such as Macaulay, there are more crimes committed per year than people who live in those communities. This can serve as a major problem for Edmonton Transit, as several LRT stations and transit centers in this area of the city. Transit stations tend to be places where people from an area concentrate, a local hub, in the same vein that a community center or shopping mall would. Whilst this can be good at reducing crime, as more eyewitnesses mean there's more deterrence for crime than if you were out alone. But this is a double-edged sword. As if an LRT station has connections to an area of the city with high crime, it means that station will have some of that crime spill over into the station. This mix of station design and security are of the utmost importance, as poor station design can amplify existing issues. Station designs with poor lighting, reduced lines of vision, and reduced foot areas can make things less safe for transit users. This is with the addition of cleanliness, with dirtier stations being less pleasant to use, which deters people from using, which in turn can make the station less safe. All of this goes to show how complicated planning a safe transit system can be. And whilst safety isn't entirely in the control of a transit agency, it has some role in keeping the system safe. Edmonton, as a city that struggles with crime, has a transit system where safety is the largest concern. In cities such as Calgary, you can easily chalk up someone worrying about safety on transit just with that person being out of touch and sheltered, with crime on transit being a rarity rather than the norm. This is in contrast to Edmonton, where safety is an actual concern you can have with riding transit. Although this is mainly confined to a few stations, Edmonton does a good job of keeping it off of the trains. Honestly, the exception of like 1 or 2 stations, sticking around the LRT system is probably a lot safer than wandering in the areas around the station. If let's say you're in downtown Edmonton after dark, it's probably a good idea to stick to the LRT stations rather than walking around somewhere like Jasper Avenue or 97th Street after dark. Despite what this video may seem like, I actually think transit is pretty safe. If you're on the Southern Capital Line or Valley Line, you probably don't have to worry at all about experiencing crime. But I think it is important to have a discussion about transit safety, as if you experience a crime in a bad station, chances are your impression of the entire network will be soured. With this being said, let's look at the top 5 worst Edmonton LRT stations. Enjoy. Located on the northern leg of the Capital Line in the community of Belvedere is Belvedere Station. Honestly, I don't find this station too bad during daytime, whilst I would probably watch my back. I would still suggest using the station during daytime hours. The main issue with this station is after dark, the station getting fairly dicey after dark. Relative to other stations, disorder and homelessness are not big issues with the station. However, the station struggles with a large amount of violence, this primarily being during after hours. This is mainly in part due to the poor station layout. With this station being built in 1977, the station's layout wasn't as thought out as it could have been, resulting in some issues revolving around poor sightlines and lighting. There's been some attempts to address these issues over the years, with some smaller renovations, increasing the amount of lighting the station has, and putting security guards inside the station. However, the station still struggles with issues of crime. Some of the issues with this station may have to do with the station being located close to a large casino, with that attracting some less than favorable individuals towards the station. However, many issues are simply because of the area the station is located in. Belvedere isn't the worst neighborhood, In fact, it's safer than a few Calgary communities such as Manchester, but it's far from being a good community either. Belvedere as a community has a crime rate that is significantly lower than other communities in the region of Edmonton is in, but would easily be one of the worst neighborhoods in Calgary for crime. I would say the main concern during daytime would be cleanliness, particularly on the stairwell on the east side of the building. That stairwell having a very, very strong and acute odor of urine. Overall, whilst Belvedere Station is a fairly troubled station, it could be a lot worse, reflecting the attempts ETS has made to try and keep the station safe. I would probably put Belvedere Station on the same tier as the worst stations in Calgary, so about as bad as Southland Station or Franklin Station. Located on the Metro line in the community of Central McDougall, near the Edmonton Ice District in Rogers Place, exists MacEwan Station. This station sits in a really weird position where to one side of it exists a really nice and upscale urban district, and to the other exists an area that struggles with extreme crime and poverty. Crime itself is not too bad at this station, with only 83 police incidents, with a weekday average ridership of 7,000. But disorder and cleanliness are something the station struggles with. If you have visited the station, you may have noticed the homeless encampments, which exist in and around the station. Due to lack of proper resources for homeless individuals, many are forced to hang around the station as a form of shelter. Overall, homeless people using the station as a shelter isn't the most significant issue. However, LRT stations shouldn't be where they have to seek shelter in, them being put in the most risk of anyone. This was seen earlier this year when a group of youth started attacking a homeless couple unprovoked, with them fighting back, resulting in the death of a 13-year-old boy. This highlights the dangers of people sheltering inside stations, showing how the safety of everyone, but especially the unsheltered, is put at risk in situations like these. Fortunately, the issues the station struggles with are primarily out of the control of Edmonton Transit, mainly being as a result of the large homeless crisis Edmonton has and due to the extreme levels of crime in the community directly to the north of it. However, the City of Edmonton and Province of Alberta should be doing more to address these issues, rather than having transit deal with the aftermath. In the meantime, one thing ETS could do is improve cleanliness, with this station having some issues with cleanliness inside the station, particularly around the eastern portion of the station head. Also known as Kingsway RAS Station, located on the Metro line in the community of Spruce Avenue, also known as Kingsway. It is located near Kingsway Mall and the Royal Alexandra Hospital. Unlike most stations, this placement may or may not be biased, although for good reason. In November 2024, within 5 minutes of being at the station, I was attacked unprovoked. In all of my time using the Calgary CTrain, I've never been assaulted. So being assaulted within less than 5 minutes of being at an Edmonton LRT station should say something about this station. Year to date, of making the video script, there's only been 80 police incidents at the station, making it not too bad. But you have to remember, the station ridership was only around 5,000 uses per weekday in 2019. You probably won't see as many incidents here as stations such as Churchill or Clairview, but your chance of becoming a victim of one are higher here. Keep in mind, this station has some of the highest amount of violence of any station in total, with it being the second most violent station on the network. This being said, you should be fine if you use the station during the daytime, but I highly encourage you not to use the station after dark, if you can.
Next train, clear. Please stand back from the platform.
Central Station is located as a part of the downtown subway of the Edmonton LRT network, where both the Metro and Capital lines meet up underneath downtown Edmonton. When looking at specifically violent crime, this is the third worst station on the Edmonton LRT network, with Kingsway Royal Alex in the station I've ranked as the worst, being the only two stations worse than this. During daytime, the station doesn't get too bad, at least not that bad relative to other stations I've covered. But what sticks out to me is how bad this station got when I visited it after dark. When I walked around Jasper Avenue after dark, I was going to enter the station, but the station entrance had a bunch of people wielding weapons. At least 10 people, all huddled in a very small area by the station entrance. I then walked to another station entrance, and again, there were people wielding weapons. Ended up using another station entrance, the one with the small corner stores, and would see one of the store clerks having their store robbed. I would end up sending a text to the Transit Watch hotline about it. However, I don't know what ended up happening with that situation. The main reason I've ranked this station as second worst though, would be how dirty this station is. Central Station is honestly extremely dirty. Like, some of the corridors of this station will make you gag if you aren't ready to handle the smell. A horrible cocktail of rancid urine, drug residues, and other gunk. One time, I got off the train at this station and saw a woman urinate right on the platform, the urine being all red and bloody looking. Another time when I was walking around the station using YouTube-friendly terms, I saw a rubber on the ground that looked freshly used. The ground around it being all wet and there was a white residue on it. It was honestly really disgusting. Overall, this station is a disgusting mess. It isn't the most violent, with 2 other stations being worse than it. But the disorder is really bad here. But before we can look at the worst station, let's take a moment to look at the honourable and dishonourable mentions. For honourable mentions, we have stations which may have made the list a few years ago but wouldn't anymore. Stadium Station has had a similar situation to Chinook or Victoria Park Stampede stations in Calgary, where the old structure was fully demolished a few years ago and replaced with an entirely new station. However, the old station was like a better and less used version of Coliseum Station, from what I've heard. However, I haven't ever used the old station, so I have no clue if it would have made the list. The other station in the honourable mentions is NAIT Station, which definitely was in the top 10 worst beforehand, although I'm not sure if it would have made the top 5. NAIT Station was a temporary station opened in 2015, which shut down in 2024, the opening of NAIT Blatchford Market Station a few hundred meters to the north. It was a pretty rough station, but it was far from the worst. For dishonourable mentions, honestly, it could be a large handful of stations. Belvedere Station was actually a last-minute decision to add as the 5th worst station, as originally I was struggling to decide if that would be added or if I would rank Quarters, 102 Street, or Churchill Station as the 5th worst. Ultimately, I ranked Belvedere Station as the 5th worst, but any of those 3 other stations could have easily placed in the top 5 worst stations instead. That being said, let's discuss the worst Edmonton LRT station. And the worst station on the Edmonton LRT network is Coliseum Station. This station is bad. Not just bad, but like really, really bad. Like, there's no competition for the worst station besides this. Coliseum Station pretty easily ranks as the worst Edmonton LRT station. I don't know much about international transit systems, however, if what I heard is correct, this is potentially the worst train station in the world. Or at least a contender for the one that struggles the most with crime. The only station I can think of which is comparable to Coliseum would be Allegheny Station in Philadelphia. That may be a stretch at first, but man, this station can get really, really bad, especially with violent crime. Per year, this station experiences more violent crime than the entire Calgary CTrain network combined. And this is ignoring the fact that this station is a very small ridership, being one of the least used Edmonton LRT stations. Social disorder and petty crime aren't as bad with this station, but that is likely because those aren't reported, with this station having a limited security presence. Surprisingly, I haven't been a victim of a crime myself here, but I've seen stuff. The first time I visited this station, I witnessed someone inebriated bringing a rock into the station, but to my surprise, the person then proceeded to bring the rock up in an attempt to smash it over the head of a security guard. In all of my time between Calgary, Edmonton, Phoenix, and Vancouver Transit, This experience was by far the most disturbing thing I've seen on transit, and it was within minutes of being at this station. And it wasn't a small rock either, it was like a large rock. They had to haul it in. This is ignoring the issues with cleanliness the station experiences, with it being by far the dirtiest station I've ever visited. Of everything I've ever smelt, the worst, the most disgusting thing I've smelt was inside the station. And keep in mind, I've explored abandoned buildings. I've smelled quite a large handful of rotting and disgusting stuff over the years. Sure, the smell of urine is really bad at this station, but there's no reason I should be smelling rot and decay inside of an LRT station. There's even been like a human turd stuck to the ceiling of this station, with toilet paper hanging off of it. It's been stuck there for at least a year. This station is a complete and utter mess. And one of the most obvious questions when talking about this station is how it's able to get to this state. Sure, this station is located in a pretty nasty part of Edmonton, being located in between the communities Eastwood and Montrose, along 118 Avenue. But a large reason why this station struggles with crime has to do with the abandonment of the Northlands Coliseum. This station was opened as a part of the original Edmonton LRT line, being opened for the 1978 Commonwealth Games. The station was built to accommodate way more people than it needed, leading to the station being over-engineered and having many different corridors, almost like a labyrinth. In classic 1970s fashion, the station is also very poorly designed, with lots of tight corners, claustrophobic feeling areas, doors which put people directly onto a high-speed arterial road underneath of an overpass, and overall a station with materials that were hard to clean. Traffic at the station always depended on when sports venues were held at the Coliseum, with high traffic whenever there was a hockey game there. But both the station and Coliseum were being under-maintained and kept in poor condition. This led to the Northlands Coliseum to be closed in late 2017, with the Oilers relocating to Rogers Place in the Edmonton Ice District. With the Coliseum abandoned, foot traffic inside the station was drastically reduced, and the abandoned building attracted a lot more crime to the area than before. Nowadays, the only time the station is active is during a 2-week-long period during the summer when K-Days occurs. But even then, many Edmontonians prefer to park at the Expo, or use transit routes such as bus from Coliseum Station, due to the issues the station has. During K-Days, there's a significantly more security presence at Coliseum Station, so it's significantly safer during that period. But even then, it is still a fairly sketchy station, although not nearly as bad as it normally gets. I think the moment that sums up this station is the time when I was waiting for bus route 8 along 118 Avenue inside the station. Whilst doing so, I saw a kid, probably no older than 5 years old, playing with a crack pipe. It's absolutely sad seeing the state the station has managed to get itself in. It is an ugly scar on the Edmonton Transit network. Well, that is it for this video. Please keep in mind that the issues with crime on Edmonton Transit are really only confined to a select few stations. That if you ride transit, you probably won't see anything. In fact, you probably would be perfectly safe riding Edmonton Transit during daytime, excluding Coliseum Station. But even then, during K-Days, you should be fine at Coliseum. Although, I would probably avoid the station outside of special events. Special thanks to NJACT and XDN for being channel members and helping financially support me. If you like this video, I have a more long-form video essay content in my Best of SNEC playlist. Additionally, I have a lot of public transit content from Alberta available on my channel, with public transit content from Vancouver coming soon, in about a month from now. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if so, consider liking and subscribing as it helps the channel out. Thank you, and have a good day.